Hello, listeners. Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network. So, everyone is talking about AI these days, but not enough people are taking the time to unpack how AI will impact the future of higher education. And that's why we launched the Generation AI podcast, co hosted by Artis Cadu, CEO of Element 451, and JC Bonilla, Chief Data Officer at VaynerMedia. Artis and JC have worked on large language models for nearly 2 decades and have remarkable technical knowledge around how they work and how generative AI will impact the future of higher ed. Generation AI isn't just about understanding artificial intelligence, it's about being part of the AI revolution in education. Tune in, get informed, and be inspired to innovate in your educational space with the power of artificial intelligence. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Generation AI wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm a higher ed CMO, and I have a confession to make. I hate silos. Now, if you've been listening to my podcast for a little while, you absolutely already know that. But one of the reasons I hate silos is they just cause so much waste of time and effort, and they are avoidable, particularly when you think about organizational structure and the ways that you can set up teamwork and create tools and technologies that allow you to have much more transparency and collaboration across your team. I'm super thrilled about this conversation with Rachel Reuben Senor, who is a almost 30-year veteran of higher ed, if you can believe that. She is going to share with us a little bit more about how she approaches looking at organizational models, whether centralized, decentralized, and give some advice for higher ed marketers on how to support a university marketing office through organizational structure. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, a podcast that empowers higher ed marketers to bring innovation, creativity, and excellence to their work. I'm your host, Jaime Hunt. Join me every 2 weeks for discussions with some of the best minds in higher education marketing. Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher educational professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. I'm so thrilled to be here with Rachel Reuben Senor, VP of Account Strategy at OHO. Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Hi, Jaime. I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
For starters, can you tell us a little bit about your career journey?
Sure. So I'm going to date myself here, but back in the 90s, I was going to college and working at a car dealership, and I was doing some accounting work. And I was the only one in the dealership that had a PC. And so the general manager came to me and said, "Well, since you know how to turn this thing on, I hear we need something called a website. Can you make us one of those?" And the websites were just becoming a thing. And I was like, "Well, I need to learn. So can you buy me some books?" And so he bought me some books and a CD-ROM with tutorials to teach me all about HTML. And I built the dealership's first site. And then I started going to different departments at the campus where I was going to school, and started asking department chairs and deans, like, "Hey, have you ever thought about a website? You really need to get on the web." And I started my own little consulting business without even really planning it. It just became a passion of mine. And then after about I think it was a couple of semesters or so of doing that, the VP of Finance and Administration found out about me and said, "Hey, we need help with the university site." At that point, it was like 4 pages long. It was created by the son of a faculty member in the communication department,
Oh,
and
wow.
it needed a lot of help. And so she hired me to work out of her office and start working on some of the university wide projects. And then I started interviewing because it was my senior year. So I started interviewing for jobs, and she said, "Before you take anything, bring your first job offer to me." And I did, and she was able to create a job for me, and I walked across the commencement stage on May 18th and into my full-time job as the university's first web editor on the 19th of that May of that year. And like I ended up staying there for 14 years. And so I really helped build up the whole website, really started learning about the how important it was for marketing, implemented the first CMS, started working more closely with admission. And during that time, I was also going to grad school and earned my MBA and ended up moving on from there to take on a role at Ithaca College as their associate vice president for marketing and communications. And I loved that job. It was one of my favorite jobs of all time. I really loved the people I got to work with there. We did a lot of work, and I spent about 4 years there, rebranded the college. I reorganized the team. I worked on licensing and trademark enforcement programs with other members in the community. There was a lot of really big things we went through in athletics rebranding. We did market research, all kinds of things. So it was really a lot of major things happened during those 4 years at Ithaca. And then I moved on to Colgate University, where I served as their vice president for communications. And then after that, I decided to go on my own and start some consulting. And it was a series of events that led to why I wanted to consult. And I'll spare all those gory details right now. But I did feel the call to some consulting. So I had a senior leadership consultancy and worked with presidents and vice presidents at other universities to help them with their marketing, a lot of marketing, organizational assessment type work, but as well as marketing projects. And so I got to work with a lot of different schools during that time. I also started doing a fractional CMO role. So I held some interim VP roles at a couple of different institutions. And then just about 4 years ago, that journey led me to OHO Interactive, where I have been ever since. And now I get to work with incredible universities across the whole country, from small to medium to large, public, private, nonprofit, for profit, as well as healthcare organizations as well.
You're like the OG web person in higher ed. I've talked to people who've started early, but like 4 pages. That's amazing. I love it. Rachel, you and I have a shared hatred of silos, right?
Oh,
That's
yes.
I end every episode, let's go bust them. I despise them. Why do you hate them?
Oh gosh, to pick just a few. This is my favorite story to share that I think epitomizes for sure why I hate them. At one of the roles that I had, my office was in this hallway where I was in the middle of two other directors that worked with me. And one day I hear one of the directors just scream at the top of her lungs, and I went running out like, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong? What's wrong?" And she's like, I just got a press release from the other director at the other end of our hallway that has all the information I've been looking for the story that I have been working on for over a month for the website. I was going to put this as a homepage story, and I've been trying to collect all this information, and here it is in the press release. And so here they are, two colleagues working in the same hallway, not 20 feet away from each other, not collaborating whatsoever, working on the same thing, but one got much further along in the process because of his contacts, apparently. And it just was like, holy cow, how much time was lost with them doing double the work. And her, like, because it was PR, media relations, and web, they didn't ever
Oh,
talk at all.
that I feel like PR is the most siloed entity in every higher ed org. It's like marketing and web sometimes work together, and you have like photo video that kind of works across everything. But I feel like, and I say that as a recovered PR director, that like it's like we just say, well, but this is different or something. It's like they're just their own little world, and nobody intersects with them. And it absolutely drives me bonkers. And so this
Mhm.
story just like totally hits a chord. I can't think of how many times this has happened.
Mhm.
And you're right. We're in offices that should be sharing information,
Mhm.
right? But yeah, we get silos even in our own department.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And to me, there's just It's got to be a territorial thing. Things that are not necessary in the workplace. Like there is no reason they couldn't be sharing that information, and we have all the digital tools available to help us with
Yes.
collaboration. So it's just really it goes beyond the org structure that he's on the PR side and she's on the web side. That's certainly a piece of it. But it's also our role as leaders to make sure that we have the right teamwork and the right teams internally that are collaborating and meeting on some kind of with some kind of regularity. And that's still not happening enough, I'm finding, as I meet with various organizations to this day. And it just blows my mind that the issues we were dealing with 15 years ago they're still there.
On my drive home this evening, I was telling my husband, I was like, I've been working in higher ed for 20 years. Why am I still seeing the same problems?
Hmm.
Why is it the same silos? Why are we having one office market online version of a master's degree and a different office marketing the on campus version of that master's degree?
Hmm.
Like, how does that serve our students? How does that serve our faculty who are now like, oh, no, 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 you have to go talk to Jaime if you want to market that piece of the program? And they're just like,
Yep.
it's the same, it's the same
Now,
program.
I've come across that too with organizations that work with OPMs. And so the
Mm,
OPM is doing the advertising and everything for the online stuff, but the university is managing the on ground version or even sometimes the hybrid versions. And they're competing against themselves in Google ads and things like that. And they're driving
yes.
up their own costs because they're completely it's crazy.
Yes. I had a previous institution that purchased the name of the institution and the word admissions for a one little graduate program. And I'm thinking, do you know how much money you wasted?
Hmm.
You just wasted because now it's like people are clicking on that expecting X university admissions information. And instead they're learning about some master's program that they didn't even have in their mind because why would they Google admissions to look for this master's program?
Hmm.
Just ridiculous.
Yep.
And then we're bidding against them to actually buy the
Right.
words,
Right.
buy those same keywords
Exactly.
for admissions.
And people wonder
Oh,
why we're having financial troubles in higher ed and why
right.
marketing has such a bad rap and it's hard to get
Yeah.
resources from leadership because so much of it has been historically just misused.
So you've seen like this transition from marketing as like kind of a Kinko's or like a service office to hopefully at many, if not most institutions, more of a value provider. But I'm also seeing, over the course of my career, the expectations on marketing are super, super different. Like it used to be like, that's just an office in the corner that does some things.
Hmm.
And now it's like, you need to solve all the ills on our campus magically with no additional resources. And we might not listen to you.
Hmm.
We might not. I
Right.
mean, have you seen that over your
Oh, sure, but let's also be clear, the days of Kinko's are not gone. I was just
no.
helping a couple of different institutions over the last year with their org assessment, and that's what I'd like the main summary ended up being you need to move away from this ticketing order system and into being a
Mhm.
strategic partner. So that still is very pervasive, like too common still. I don't feel like I have seen enough institutions that have actually made that switch. But in terms of like not just being marketing on the side, but having a strategic value, that comes from the top. If the president does not understand or articulate the strategic importance of marketing and communications, they're not going to be funded adequately. They're not going to have the right staffing and
Mhm.
may not even have the right leadership or the leadership that's needed to well, let me rephrase that. They might have the right leadership that could really try to, influence the president and change the way they think. But that's where it comes from. It's got to start at the top. And I interviewed at schools over my years, and I knew when meeting the president if marketing was going to be a strategic priority or not. Usually within the first few minutes of our conversation, and that would define whether I would want to move forward in the search process or not.
What Rachel just said is so important. If you're in a search, don't just take it for the title.
Hmm.
Don't just take it for the money. Don't just take
Exactly.
it because you've always wanted to work at this school. You have to believe and you have to know that the president sees value in marketing and that the president's going to see it as a strategic driver. And One way to do that is to look at the strategic plan. And if there's like maybe one bullet buried in the strategic plan related to marketing, it's not a priority. It's just not. Ask about budget. Ask about, what does the president see marketing as doing for the institution? What other questions would you suggest people ask it when they're interviewing to suss that out?
It's so funny that you say that because I think it was just a week ago or so that there was an article in, I think it was in Inside Higher Ed, was a Jenny Plant's article about like the top 10 things to ask. And
Yep.
she had, there was Mila Edmond also posted on LinkedIn, like, what else would you add to this? And I had a whole slew of things, but really of all the things that I mentioned, I would ask the president about the board of trustees and what their
Mm.
involvement is. Is there a separate marketing committee, or is it like joined with advancement or joined with enrollment? That gives me some signals right there. How involved is the board in marketing activities and interest in marketing? Are, and you can't ask this, but what you want to get at is, are they micromanagers, or are they, we trust who we have brought in, give us a, twice a year, maybe annual update, and we're good to go. It's like, really want to understand that dynamic, because that also influences the president, which influences what kind of resources you're going to have available, and strategically, if you're going to get to be at a strategic level, or if you're going to be micromanaged by, trustees and other partners.
I've been so lucky with trustees for this is my third VP level gig. And I've been so lucky with trustees who are like, we want to know what's happening, right? We want to hear about what we're doing, but when you're done, we're going to be like, that sounds great. Awesome. Great job. And in some cases, I've had trustees advocate for larger budgets. At one institution, $1.5 million addition to my budget, basically because trustees were like, yeah, she's doing what we think she should be doing. So give her more money. Um, so yeah, you make a really good point about that. So in your consulting work, you do a lot of organizational assessment, and that's something that I think is really needed probably at every single one of the 4,000 schools of higher education in our country. But what are some of the organizational models that you see when you're doing an assessment, and kind of how do you evaluate which of those models is appropriate for an institution?
They're generally in three different categories. They're centralized, they're center led or centrally coordinated, or they're decentralized. And so, I firmly believe there is no one size fits all. Every organization is different, has very different dynamics, politics, funding, etc. So I really want to do a deep dive on that particular organization. I usually start with scanning the strategic plan for the university. I think, as you were saying earlier, if marketing's buried deep within, that's going to give me some really interesting clues. But also
Mhm.
really wanting to understand, what the president and senior leadership are prioritizing, because ultimately that should be trickling down to marketing, and marketing should have their own strategic plan that ladders up to that. And too often I'm finding that they have a plan that's out in the universe, it's totally separate, has no connection to the
Mhm.
strategic plan, and that's usually because they're not included in any way in there, other than maybe, if they're lucky, maybe one that says like raise brand perception or something to that effect.
Yeah.
One of those generic things, which is important, but not, it's not enough. So that's those are the main ways that I see it. I don't see, like I said, I don't see and one size fits all. I've never recommended the same organizational structure to the same one to any organization. Each one I've done has been so very different, based on their needs. I have a strong feeling about, people that are there, if they've been there a really long time, not just discounting them and saying, oh, they're lifers, they're not going to serve the organization. A lot of them really are jazzed to be there. And they're some of your biggest proponents out in the world and talking, about the school. They just need some guidance. They need some leadership. They need some, probably level up with their skills. And so I'm really a big supporter of really trying to make sure that there are seats in the organization for people you already have. Now, that's not to say there might be a few bad apples in there, or a bad apple, and there might be a need to move some people on. but I always want to give them the benefit of the doubt and try some things first to see. So it could be that, we're working around people that are there to some extent, especially some of the schools that are more unionized and it's really, really difficult to make any kind of substantial changes. Usually, with those kinds of organizations, we can at least make some changes to job descriptions around their accountabilities, and really, put a performance improvement plan in place that's based around professional development and some other accountabilities and things that they should be responsible for. So, yeah, I don't think there is just one way that everybody should be structured across the board.
That makes total sense. And I have seen institutions try to like grab a model from another institution and plop it onto theirs. And I just think that's a recipe for disaster because, like you said, the politics alone can be so different at every institution. And, in some spaces, a centralized model makes complete and total sense. And then in others, it's like that's just a way to build frustration with deans or frustrations with department heads. And yeah, definitely unique for everywhere. But when you mentioned like those long-term employees still potentially having um, an interest in evolving an organization, I think about my situation I walked into here. Um, I have a 30-year employee who has been the biggest advocate for the changes that I've made in the department. Um, he is hungry for the change. He's excited about the change. He advocates for the change. He tells people all over campus that the change is great. He's like a little department ambassador for me or like a
That's
little
awesome.
Jamie Hunt ambassador, just like Jamie's doing these cool new things. And it's so cool to see because I feel like sometimes you walk in and it's like, I'm just going to outlast you because VPs come and go and
Hmm.
they always want to make changes. And I'm just going to ride this out. So I was really excited to see his
Hmm.
enthusiasm.
I had a similar thing at an institution that I was consulting with, and there was someone there a little over 30 years. And she came up very much on the print side. She was in print publications. Would go on press checks and things like that. And that started to get dated because they were, instead of doing originally when she started, she said they were doing like 6 magazines a year. Then it went down to 4, then 3, then 2. We were talking about moving it down to 1 for budget purposes. So it was like, what was left for her to do? And she on her own had started taking some design courses. And I saw some other traits in her that I said, the department needs a project manager. This is one of the roles that I see that's critical and is missing. And I see those traits in her. And so I actually recommended that her role evolve into that. And that did end up working out really well. That was like over 2 years ago. She's still there. And from what I hear, thriving in that role. So, and she too was going around campus and talking about like the department and all the changes that were happening, and just such a, she was just so passionate. And I'm thinking about all the influence she could have outside of the school too, people in the region that she talks
Mhm.
to, as the word of mouth,
Yeah.
that's like marketing the college. So I'm really glad that that was able to work out.
I love that. We call our person the mayor of ODU because the
Nice.
nature of his role is such that he intersects with everybody.
Uh-huh.
He's the campus photographer, and the campus photographer knows everybody on
Sure.
campus, right?
Sure.
And so, you want the mayor of ODU to be excited about what you're doing, and I just love that he is. And when I think about all the institutions I have been at the VP level at, the photographer is always like the person, right? They're always the person that everybody knows. Every office is intersected with the photographer. And I'm so happy, that he's excited. Makes such a difference. And he might, there's been times where maybe he hasn't totally understood like why I'm making a decision, but because he's appreciates the overall direction I'm taking it, he trusts me that it's going to be the right decision. So that makes me happy. Hey, it's Jamie Hunt, and I want to personally invite you to the industry's hottest event this summer, the Engage Summit, hosted in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th. The Engage Summit is your roadmap for AI readiness in higher education. Sessions will focus on cutting edge AI applications that are reshaping student outreach, enhancing staff productivity, and offering deep insights into ROI. This isn't your typical conference. It's a strategic summit where you'll learn from the best about leveraging AI and digital strategies in higher ed marketing. Imagine 2 days filled with hands on sessions, real success stories, and the chance to network with top minds in the field. You'll leave with practical, transformative takeaways as you learn how AI fosters a more personalized, efficient approach from recruitment to student success. Oh, and the best part? The Engage Summit is incredibly affordable. Use the discount code Enrollify50 and you can register for just $99. So join your favorite Enrollify network creators at the Engage Summit this June. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there. So, what beyond, we talked about these organization models, centralized, center led, decentralized. Um, Decentralized tends to get a bad rap. But do you ever recommend decentralized as a model?
I think it's so tricky. I don't think I've ever recommended it with any of the organizations that I've worked with because realistically, how can that be efficient from a financial
Yeah.
perspective, from the budget that they spend to the human resources, the duplication of effort, and then probably the duplication of all the different tools. I mean, imagine all the different CRMs and email tool, all this different things. Like, I just can't imagine that there's a way in which that could be really financially solvent for the institution. That said, I have definitely been convinced that there are some schools that the center led model, so they technically still get to be decentralized, but they have some kind of connection. Now, there's different versions of center led. They have a dotted line reporting to the center. They have an informal, they're not really reporting, but they are in some kind of team type meetings on a regular basis, or there's the actual reporting in. And that was a model that I had at one of the institutions I worked at, where we had the marketing communication managers for each of the schools within the college sit in the dean's office. So they were like boots on the ground. They were there, but they did report to my office. So I've definitely seen different models work. I personally haven't lived within a fully decentralized university myself, though I've talked to many people that's their job. They are in those jobs. So I definitely lean towards the center led type models.
How hard is it to move a campus from a decentralized to a center led or centralized model?
It depends on the politics of the institution and the leadership and how much trust there is in the leadership. I have found when there's a brand new VP for marketing communications, in some cases, they get a lot of honeymoon credentials. Is that the right phrase?
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
their first year or two, it's like, sure, whatever they want to do, let's do that. And in other cases, it's like, who's this new kid on the block? I'm
Mhm.
not trusting a thing that they say. And I have a client that's on the West Coast, and he is super super smart. He's a VP of marketing communications, and he's implementing the center led model. And he's just said it was not going to go over here to be fully centralized, that this was the big win, was at least getting it to a center led point.
Yeah, I think about, that sort of when you're the new kid, it can look like you're trying to empire build. And that is something that, it kind of makes me laugh because it's like, it's so much more work, right? Like I'm trying to take on, I've centralized at the last two institutions I was at, and it's so much more work and responsibility to have this centralized team. And like kingdom building, that's all great and everything, but there's a trade-off of now you have oversight of all of these other communications areas too. And I hope that most people wouldn't make a recommendation for a move like that without it being in the best interest of the organization. I mean, truly, you can't make a decision to centralize or move to central led, I don't think, for one person or because there's like one problem that you're trying to solve. It really needs to be looking at the whole big picture. What are the politics of the organization? What are the personalities at play? What's the work like? Um, what's the financial situation of the institution? What's the enrollment situation at the institution? There's just so many factors that to say there's a one size fits all solution, just I can't believe that that's correct.
Totally. And you hit on something that's one of the things that I do when I do an organizational assessment, I'm not just looking at org structure. The operational piece is just as critical because that's where the money is spent. And when you find,
Right.
especially in a decentralized organization, that's where you can find financial efficiency and budget efficiencies. How many? I worked with one school. We found four or five different email programs in use across all these decentralized. Imagine if they pooled their budgets and just
Mhm.
had one account, or each of them have an account in one program, the university would have saved money. There's just like there were so many redundancies of things that the university was paying double, triplicate plus for that wasn't necessary.
That I think about Canva on our campus, and it's like every office had a Canva account, and every office was manually, maybe, if we're lucky, going in and setting the brand colors and the brand fonts, and maybe, if we're lucky, uploading the right versions of logos, and maybe, if we're lucky, using our templates. But once we move to a centralized Canva, it's like suddenly we could have every college have access to their special logo, um, their own templates, their own, and then everybody has the brand colors and the brand fonts, and you're not having to worry about somebody saying like, "Well, I don't have, or I don't know how to upload," or whatever, fill in the blank. Just that alone, I think, has been a huge savings for the institution,
I'm sure.
and that's not to mention there was an institution I was at early in my career that had different CMSs for the websites. Like some people were using WordPress and some were using Drupal and some were using this, and it's just chaos and a waste.
Yes, I'm talking to a prospective client right now that that has exactly that, 4 different CMSs on their campus. But just
Oh,
quick sidebar back to Canva. I know we're not talking about them, but Canva is a product I dreamed up 20 years ago that has finally become reality. Like,
wow.
I knew there had to be some way because we were creating templates and nobody could use InDesign. Hardly anyone could use Photoshop. The templates were useless. And it was like, why? There's got to be something. And it can't be. I was like, I used Print Shop when I was a kid. Like, there's got to
Right.
be a way, like, that there's something that's more approachable and has like lockdown templates, but also our lockdown brand visual system in there, and that it's just accessible for people to use. And so now that's one of the biggest things that I'm recommending. That's like probably the one size fits all. Like I think in like every
Yes.
organization I've been talking to in the last couple of years, I'm like, implement Canva university centralized version. Like, you have to have it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when I was at Winston-Salem State, I wanted to move forward with Canva, but my team selected a different tool that was clunky and awkward, and like you couldn't really make like little fine-tune adjustments to things. It was so locked down that it was like if your headline was one word longer, you just couldn't put the headline in, like all of that. And then Canva comes along and it's just so seamless and easy to use, and you can create templates super fast. And I found the same sort of resistance to it at Miami. And then the designer that was working on the project, I'm like, I'm going to make the biggest naysayer be the person that works on this project so that she can get an understanding of how this works. And she ended up actually doing a lot of her designing in Canva, a lot of, because she thought like the background remover worked so slick, the AI was so slick, it was so easy to just push a button and the brand colors are across. This is not a Canva commercial, but Canva, if you want to sponsor me, contact me. Um, but it's just such a great tool, I think, for campuses.
One of my former interns at one of the schools I worked at is their head of customer success or something like that now. I forget his exact
Wow,
title, but he's in a senior role with the organization. So that's been pretty
that's
cool to see him
awesome.
on LinkedIn. Yeah.
So pivoting away from Canva, but I do think that Canva is one tool that can do this, but what else has an impact on breaking silos besides structure? And again, I kind of think Canva can break some silos too, but what are some other things?
Definitely teams, teamwork. So bringing all the writers together on a regular basis, and using tools that can help collect ideas, story leads, you know, the different events and things that the organization has to market. There are just so many tools out there now. I remember probably 15 or so years ago, a very, very popular university was building something in-house that just seemed dreamy to me. And it was this they were calling it something like a beehive, or it had something to do with the because like everyone would swarm to it, I think was the idea.
Ooh.
And they would store like all these different story leads and stories, but it would also have the different versions of the story. So if a story came in, they use a version of it for social media, a version of it for the alumni magazine, a version for the homepage. They would keep track of all those things in there and when and where they were used. It was used in a New York Times ad on this day, or this month, this year, so that you can start to see patterns and even get analytics out of that too. So having the whole team in like a system like that and keeping track and of especially from a storytelling perspective. I think that's critical. Project management tools is a similar idea, not being in silos, but having complete visibility into all the different projects that are going on, that various teams are working on. And, within the department, I was a big fan of having teams share out on a regular basis, at least monthly. What are they working on? Like the top 5 things or something like that, and give them like 5 minutes or so in each of the full department staff meetings that we'd have on a monthly basis. I'm all about it was all about, always about sharing. Like the more we can share and talk about what we're doing, the less likely that we will be stuck in our little silos.
I love that. One thing that we're doing, and we just talked about this evening actually, with my director of project management and operations, is she's going to be implementing something called Team Notes, where she's going to be putting in Slack, and we might email it out as well at first just to get people used to it. Um, Sort of a what are the high points for this week from each unit within our division. So, what are the big things that web is tackling this week? What are the big things? So it's like kind of all in one central place, and you can kind of say, oh, wait a second, I see that web is working on this project. I'm working on a press release about something that intersects with that project. I should go talk to Megan or whomever about that. But also kind of having like the win of the week. What's the big success? And it can be big, it can be little, but kind of giving that like, hey, we finally got approval for this thing we've been waiting for 3 months, or fill in the blank. The hope is she's bringing this to us from her background is at an agency. The hope is that it just helps people kind of see the bigger picture without having to necessarily do a lot of digging into projects. But I do think your mention of, that transparency, having your project management system so that everybody can peek into pretty much every project. I think that just creates I think a level playing field for understanding what's going on in the division.
And to me, that's just low hanging fruit. And too many groups that I work with, that's one of the
Mhm.
first things I find. There are 3 different project management systems in the department. Nobody has access to the other one. That's their own, like they each have their own little fiefdoms. And that's the first thing I say. I don't care which tool you use, figure it out amongst yourselves, but everyone needs to
Right.
be on one platform.
100%. 100%. Every time somebody's like, well, but we like to do it. No, we're not doing Asana and Trello, like one or the other. And we're not using, a Google form to collect projects while also using Asana to collect projects. And we've got to think too about our campus partners who are intersecting with us. They don't want to use forms that are in a whole bunch of different systems. I know on campus, there's like a bazillion different project management systems going on across campus, ticketing systems for keys and for parking and for IT and all of that. At least our department shouldn't have multiples, just have one and stop making everybody crazy. So, when you are intersecting with teams and talking about, how to develop a structure, talk to me a little bit about whether you ever recommend professional development. It sounds like you identified someone who had some skill sets that may be outside of what their current job description is, but how do you make recommendations around professional development for teams?
I've always been so passionate around professional development. I mean, I feel like it's what has gotten me to where I am in my career today. It's so important to stay connected to the industry and to the greater industry, not within higher ed, but also marketing and communications at large. And that's a it's one of the big reasons we created at OHO some free webinars, conferences, because it's like I call them my passion project. I have several other team members that work on these and lead these now, but it's been such a great thing to be able to give back to the higher ed community and provide opportunities that I know so many of them don't have the budgets to do on their own. But for schools that do have the opportunities, conferences, being able to network with your peers is professional development in and of itself. Even if you're not being physically, taught a specific curriculum, having a conversation like you and I are today. And I went to AMA in the fall and I had a sidebar conversation with another friend, and how much I learned in that conversation. That's so much can happen just outside the conference rooms, outside the conference presentations with networking as well. But there's so many great webinars, and so much is freely accessible or reasonably accessible through online tools like Coursera and LinkedIn Learning and all those different kinds of things. So I'm super passionate about it. It's always been in my toolbox of things that when I've had teams, or direct reports working with me, that I always want to make sure there is some plan for the year ahead for their professional development.
Absolutely. I feel like you and I should be best friends. I love that you mentioned LinkedIn Learning and Coursera. I think that if you're listening, it's worth checking with your HR office to see if they've invested in those tools on an enterprise level. Because I've been at multiple institutions that have had LinkedIn Learning as an enterprise-wide um, professional development opportunity. And that's something that you can take advantage of, something that's already paid for. But also, like you said, all those free or low cost webinars that are available, like jump on that. There's no reason. And I sign up for a lot knowing that I have a meeting at this time, but I know that they'll send out the video afterwards and I can watch that some other time. Like take advantage of it all.
And yeah, and most, like, if it's an organization like ours, we have a YouTube channel full of, right now, 4 or 5 years worth of webinars. So you could just
Wow.
go on YouTube and look if you're looking for a specific thing around SEO or uh, organizational assessments. Like, there's for all the different kinds of topics. There's so much out there. There's to me, there's like no excuse to not
No.
always be learning. One of our core values at our agency is always better, and I love that, and I just feel like I resonate so deeply with it because it's just something I'm so passionate about. I always want to learn more things. When you posted on LinkedIn over, I think it was Thanksgiving break, that you were taking the class about generative AI, prompt engineering for generative AI, I was like, "Ooh, that sounds like something I've been like really thinking about. I should just do it." And it gave me that push to do it. I'm just not going to sit back and just let the industry kind of run over me. I'm invested in just staying up to date with all these things. So, like you, I also finished that, got my certificate.
And that one was so great.
It
I
was.
learned so much.
It blew my mind. Like, I had no idea. At first I was like, how much more? I mean, it's prompts. Like, how much more?
Right.
How advanced could this be? Holy cow. It was
Yeah.
pretty awesome.
I felt like, "Oh my gosh, I was just scratching the surface," and here I thought I was, like, maybe not a power user, but, like, at least the intermediate user, and it just was like, "Oh my gosh, there's so much more." It was such a great course. And you mentioned that, like, not letting the world pass you by, and I think about there's been twice in my career where I have been hired, quote, unquote, "replacing" somebody who had retired, and this is not an ageism thing because, like, my dad was learning up until the day he retired, like but there's a certain type of person that, quote, unquote, "retires in place," and they sort of they stop learning, they stop growing. This individual was still faxing press releases in 2007, and it's like, I don't wanna be like, I live in fear of being that person, the person who's I'm just taking up space for the last 7 years of my career or whatever, and not doing new things. Rachel, what roles do you think higher ed CMOs need to be thinking about to add to their teams or to augment their teams with over the next, maybe 2 to 5 years? It's really hard to predict beyond that. It's probably hard to predict even up to 5 years, but
It totally is, but it also, we're still so far behind as an industry. And,
yeah.
talking about earlier about getting pummeled over by the industry, I just feel like we are getting pummeled over by corporate. Like, We
Yeah.
still have not caught up. There are still things, and that's why I'm really trying to push more advancement and learning around AI and things like that, because I really believe that it has some strong potential to help us as marketers. And we shouldn't wait until 3, 4 years after corporate marketers have implemented things. So, two of the ideas that I have three ideas, but two of the ideas that come to mind are not new. They're things that I implemented probably 15 plus years ago, and they're still not common enough. So the number one is a marketing analyst, some version of
Mhm.
that, whether it's a director, I don't care what level you give it, but at the core, a marketing analyst, a data analyst, data analytics guru. You have to be able to prove your ROI. You need
Mhm.
KPIs that are set. You need to be able to, as a VP, you need this information. You need to be able to report up, report to the trustees, report to the senior cabinet, fight for more budget. And you can't do that without solid analytics. And there are so many, so many different places that we get analytics from. You really need a data wonk in your organization that's going to be able to think about that from with a marketing lens, pull that all together and have it make sense to help it inform future decision making. So again, I hired someone in 2011 with this role. It's not new,
Right.
but it's not common enough. I think
Mm-mm.
of the dozen plus organizations I've worked with in the last 5 or so years. I think maybe once I've seen this role, if that. So
Wow.
it's not common enough. Another one is also it's not new, but it's still not widely used, and that's the experiential marketer. Now, some will say, well, folks in admissions really do that, those that are like the event producers and things like that. To some extent, yes, but a true like from a brand experience, like how people are going to experience the brand, I really think that there is a strong need for that going forward to resonate on an emotional level with your target audiences. The third one I was thinking about is product marketing, which is not really a phrase we use in higher ed. It's certainly more corporate, but I think there's a lot to be said about someone who fully understands, say, the undergrad portfolio versus the grad portfolio versus certificates and the non-traditional learners and what they're looking for. Yeah, I wouldn't want to. We were talking earlier about like online or being totally separate. I'm not a fan of that from a organizational perspective, but from a product marketing, there is different things about these products that are being offered that I don't think I think that too many people are splitting themselves too thin trying to market all the things. And so I think having some specialty, I know this is a pipe dream because higher ed doesn't have infinite positions available, but I would like to see people that are more focused from a marketing perspective instead of just being a director of marketing, having one that's focused like as a product marketer around the undergraduate portfolio, and whether that's online, hybrid, on ground, combination thereof, whatever. I think that that's something I'd love to see in the coming years.
I actually really adore that idea. Like this whole notion of specialists, I feel like the first maybe 10 years of my career, it was like everybody needed to be a generalist, right? You needed to be able to do all the things. And the more things you had in your toolbox that you could do, the more marketable you were. And I think that's benefited me from the perspective of as a VP, I've held pretty much every role that exists in my department. But we do not invest enough in specialists, is my opinion now. And that is something that corporate does. To your point, industry has people who have very narrow bands of expertise that are deep, 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 deep. And that's something when we talk about our competitors, we're usually say things like, oh, this other school down the road or this other school that's like us. But our competitors for people's attention are everything else in the world. And we are not well competing with I've been searching for a standing desk, right? Been doing a lot of research on standing desks. Every element of my life right now, I'm being served ads about different variants of desks, right? Everywhere I go, it's desks everywhere. And it's like then I'm also getting these advertisements for like high-end desk accessories and all of this stuff because these are savvy marketers, right? They understand if she's looking for a stand-up desk, she might also be looking for accessories. And because she was looking at this particular brand of stand-up desks, which is very expensive and I'm not buying, um, she might want these more higher end executive level desk accessories, or and then if she's interested in that, you know what, she might also want this high end journal that will help her with the journaling and meditation practice over the year. Blah blah blah, fill in the blank. And in higher ed, we're like retargeting and thinking we're cool. Like
So true. It's not enough. Yep. Hmm.
yeah. I mean, retargeting is great and we need to be doing it, but we don't have the expertise on our teams typically to be able to do more beyond that. And when I watch, I'm somehow on marketing. Well, I don't know how somehow I'm a marketer, but I'm on marketing TikTok now, and I see some of the cool things that people are doing, and I just think I wish we could pull that off, but I don't know if I have the expertise to do that with this with the team that I have. Not that they're not talented, but they're already stretched super, super thin. And this is a very niche area. I don't know if I can do that. And how do you approach helping people when you're working in a consulting capacity, helping people create those positions and build a case for those?
So I start with a needs assessment and looking across what the marketing organization looks like, what kind of roles they have, and do a gap analysis. Like, where are they missing some critical roles that I usually see or consider to be standard in the organization? And so if I see one that's missing, let's say like in an organization I worked with recently, I said, you don't have anyone leading digital strategy and you really need someone who's thinking about that on a daily basis. And that's not just a fancy word for the website. It's across all digital properties. You need someone who's thinking strategically about that. And so I have a huge database of a gazillion job descriptions that I have collected, saved, written over the years, and I start looking through them and pulling out pieces from each one of what I think this in specific school might need. And I build a draft job description depending on who I'm working with at the organization, whether it's the VP or the president. I then make the case of what this position would be. And I start with accountabilities. What is this person at the end of the day ultimately going to be accountable for? And that to me, more than like they need, minimum of a bachelor's degree and 5 years experience, I really like to
Right.
focus on what their accountabilities will be. And so that's the primary way that I go about it. If sometimes an organization will come to me and say, like, I've been trying to get these positions approved and I've just not had any success, I help them find new ways to pitch it, to pitch the different positions depending on what they are. I read a lot, and so I often have somewhere some kind of market research report that I've read that has some data that can help justify certain positions too. But then also, we're growing, we're evolving, we're changing slowly. Some positions that we had 10, 20 years ago, we may not need in their exact form today. I'm also a big fan of redefining positions. So
Mm,
perhaps it's like, so the role already exists. I don't have to get one approved. I've got a line, I've got an FTE. I just may have to beg for some more money to add to it if the salary is not there. And it may be that the person that's in it can stay in it and grow, can be given a growth opportunity, but their position is really largely changing. And so that's a way of doing it where you don't have to go and get approval for a brand new position.
that's really good advice because I know there's some systems where adding an FTE is like
An act
like
of
giving birth
Congress.
to, yeah, exactly. Like, it's just almost impossible to do. So I love the idea of repurposing and finding maybe more money to elevate the position's level to a salary that you can actually recruit, somebody into a more specialized role. I love that. What other thoughts do you have that might help a CMO figure out how to structure their team and their work?
A big thing is listening. I mean, it sounds pretty obvious, but it's actually not. When I've talked to some CMOs, and they say, "Oh, I'm having a hard time keeping people. We have such turnover. I really need to stop the hemorrhaging." Is a phrase I've heard of several times. And I thought, well, what are you doing in terms of interactions? What is that like? Let's go back to basics here. And so often I'm like, it doesn't sound to me like I'm that there's like active listening going on. And I think that's really important to hear what the boots on the ground, and where are their struggles, where are their challenges, where are their wins, and really understanding that instead of, some CMOs are not connected enough. largely because of the political environment we're in now. They're so often pulled into crisis and issues management that they don't have time to really listen to and work closely
Mm.
with their team, especially on the marketing side. So yeah, I again think that's a basic but critical thing that CMOs should focus on. And leading up, if I, CMOs, hopefully most of them are now, or all I should say, hopefully are reporting to the president, but a lot of presidents are still not well versed in marketing. Many are very open to learning more. They just need to be educated. They haven't had the right person to help teach them, educate them, inform them. And so thinking about that as an opportunity that, even though you technically that's your boss, you still can influence that person. I think that is, serving as a coach in that way, and how marketing communications can and should be strategic. And then I think the last thing is about just fostering teamwork and collaboration. The more that you embody that yourself, and you're showing how you're doing that with other groups like enrollment and advancement and athletics and all these student life, the more your team will be likely to do it within their own group. So just as much as you can do to foster that, I think will go a long way.
That is excellent advice. And I agree. It shouldn't need to be said listening, but our jobs are busy.
Yeah.
These are hard jobs. And sometimes, what is this phrase that cobbler's children have no shoes?
Yes.
Sometimes
Yes.
we ignore the needs of our people to
Totally.
help people outside our
Yep.
divisions. So
Hmm.
yeah, totally. Well, Rachel, I've loved this conversation. I feel like we have so much in common. Where can people find you if they want to have a conversation?
The best way right now is LinkedIn. I did flee Twitter last June. I have not looked back. I just can't do it.
Mm.
I miss it terribly because that was a huge, huge part of my life for a decade plus. But I think, I've tried some of the other tools like Threads and Blue Sky, and I'm just not finding the traction there yet. So LinkedIn would be, the best way.
Awesome. And are you Rachel Reuben Senor
I
on
am.
LinkedIn?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
And as always, listeners, you can find me on LinkedIn at Jaime Hunt, Jaime. And I am like occasionally posting on Twitter, refuse to call it X, Jaime Hunt IMC, JaimeHunt IMC. Super bitter because there was such a great
There
community
was.
on
I
there. It
know.
was wonderful. But I
Hmm.
feel like that's kind of being built up on LinkedIn, which is good. Little bit different, but at least there's some community there. I also have been dabbling with TikTok, the higher ed CMO on TikTok. So you can find me there. Typically that's more of like a rant. So if you want to hear me rant about something, you either need to marry me or go on TikTok.
Good to know.
Right, my poor husband. But I'm always eager to chat. I know I have a couple of folks I owe some emails to, but you can also shoot me a note, higheredcmo@gmail.com. But thank you so much, Rachel, for coming on the show. This has been fantastic and hopefully helpful for people as they think about org structure and all that good stuff. And as always, everyone, you know what I'm going to say. Let's go bust some silos. Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry best as your host. Learn from Mallory Wilsey, Seth Odell, Jenny Lee Fowler, Eddie Francis, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.